I've debated sharing this for months, agonizing over the decision. Part of me hopes that writing it down will somehow make it less real, but I know that's just wishful thinking. What I'm about to confess isn't just a secret. It's a nightmare that could spell the end of everything we know. This is the story of how a virus mutated in our lab and became something far more terrifying than any of us could have imagined. I've worked in a high-security research facility for the last 7 years. Our lab was at the forefront of virology, constantly pushing the boundaries of what we knew about viruses and how they could be used to combat diseases. The work was demanding, but the potential benefits were enormous. We were always aware of the risks, but I don't think any of us truly believed those risks would become reality. Everything started about 6 months ago. We were experimenting with a new virus strain that showed promise in targeting and destroying cancer cells. It was designed to be highly specific, attacking only the cancerous cells and leaving healthy ones untouched. The early results were incredibly promising, and there was a palpable sense of excitement in the lab. We were on the verge of something monumental. But then, something went wrong. It was a Friday evening, and most of the team had already left for the weekend. I was working late, running a final series of tests. That's when I noticed it. The virus samples in the petri dishes were changing. At first, the mutations were subtle, small changes in the structure of the virus, things that could easily be overlooked. But as I watched, the changes became more pronounced. The virus was evolving, adapting to its environment in ways we hadn't anticipated. I called my supervisor, Dr. Harris, who came down to the lab immediately. Together, we watched as the virus continued to mutate. It was happening so quickly, far faster than anything we'd ever seen before. We decided to contain the samples and run a full analysis on Monday. I left the lab that night with an uneasy feeling, but I tried to convince myself it was just the stress of the job. Monday morning, everything changed. When I arrived at the lab, it was in chaos. Security personnel were everywhere, and my colleagues were in a state of panic. The virus had continued to mutate over the weekend, breaching its containment. Several of the lab animals we used for testing were dead, their bodies displaying signs of rapid decomposition and necrosis. But the most horrifying part was that some of the animals, the ones we thought were dead, started moving again. I know how this sounds, like something out of a bad horror movie, but I swear it's true. The animals, their flesh rotting and eyes glazed over, were moving, attacking anything that got close. We were ordered to evacuate the lab and leave everything behind. The facility went into lockdown with armed guards and biohazard teams brought in to contain the outbreak. But deep down, I knew it was already too late. For days, we were kept in isolation, subjected to tests and decontamination procedures. The official story was that there had been a minor containment breach, but I knew the truth. The virus had mutated into something far more dangerous, something that turned its hosts into mindless, aggressive husks. It was a zombie virus, and it was out. The first signs that the virus had escaped the facility came about a week later. Reports started coming in from the nearby town. People falling ill with strange symptoms, displaying aggressive behavior, and then dying only to rise again. The government moved quickly, imposing a quarantine on the area and setting up a perimeter. But it wasn't enough. The virus was spreading, and there was no way to stop it. I was released from isolation and given strict instructions to stay home and avoid contact with anyone. But I couldn't just sit by and watch as everything fell apart. I needed to know what was happening, needed to see it for myself. So, against all advice, I went back to the lab. The place was a ghost town, deserted and eerily silent, but the signs of chaos were everywhere. Overturned equipment, broken glass, and bloodstains on the floor. I made my way to the containment area where we had kept the virus samples. The door was ajar, the lock broken. Inside, the room was a mess. The containment units had been breached, the samples gone. I found Dr. Harris's notes scattered on the floor. He had been trying to document the mutations, but his last entry was chilling. The virus is intelligent. It adapts. We're not dealing with a simple pathogen. This is something else. As I left the lab, I saw them. People wandering the halls, their eyes vacant, their skin pale and mottled. They moved slowly, aimlessly, until they noticed me. Then their movements changed, becoming purposeful, aggressive. I ran, barely making it out of the facility alive. That night, I watched from a distance as the military moved in, sealing off the area and setting up checkpoints. But it was clear that containment had failed. The virus was out and it was spreading. The next few weeks were a blur of chaos and fear. The news was filled with reports of outbreaks, cities going into lockdown, and the government struggling to maintain control. The virus spread quickly, turning people into mindless, violent creatures. It wasn't long before the term zombie was being used openly. The world was falling apart, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. I've been hiding ever since, moving from place to place, trying to stay one step ahead of the infected. They're everywhere now, roaming the streets, attacking anyone they come across. The cities are war zones, the countryside no better. There's no safe place left, no sanctuary from the nightmare we've unleashed. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Every day is a struggle for survival. Every night a battle against the fear that I'll be next. I've seen friends and loved ones turned, watched as the virus stripped them of their humanity and turned them into monsters. The guilt is overwhelming, knowing that I was part of the team that created this horror, that I could have done something to stop it. I keep thinking back to those early days, to the moment I first noticed the mutations. If only I had acted sooner, been more cautious. But it's too late for regrets. The world has changed, and we're living in a nightmare of our own making. I don't know if anyone will ever read this, if there's anyone left to read it. But I needed to share my story, to confess my part in this tragedy. If you're out there, if you're still alive, take this as a warning. The virus is real and it's relentless. Stay safe, stay hidden, and whatever you do, don't let them get you. I fear that the worst is yet to come, and I don't know if we'll ever find a way to stop it. This is my confession, my last desperate plea for forgiveness. I helped create this monster, and now it's loose in the world. I can only hope that someday, somehow, we'll find a way to fight back. Until then, I'll keep running, keep hiding, and keep hoping that there's still a chance for humanity.